Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, we'll get an update from Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President Ashli on daycare, tariffs, and her role this year at Fancy Farm. But our first guest is U.S. Senate candidate, former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron. He is running for the seat that is opening up because the state's longest-serving senator ever, Mitch McConnell, has decided not to run for another term next year. Cameron was Kentucky's Attorney General from 2019 to 2023, and he was the Republican nominee for governor in 2023. Cameron started his career as general counsel to Senator McConnell, and he was endorsed by President Donald Trump in his statewide campaigns. His campaign this time says he stands in alignment with the president. It could be a crowded Senate race. Congressman Andy Barr is also in the running. Businessman Nate Morris is considering, and TV commentator Scott Jennings has put out some teasers. Candidate Daniel Cameron joining us now. Welcome. Appreciate you coming in.
Bill, it's always good to be with you. Thank you so much.
Did you always know you would likely return to elective politics and make another run?
Well, you know, I've enjoyed the time getting to spend with my wife and our two boys. Our youngest, Bennett, just turned 1 a couple of days ago. And so I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed the opportunity to serve at 1792 Exchange as the CEO there. Where we try to dismantle DEI and fight against ESG and other sort of left-leaning or woke ideology. And so I've had a good year. Obviously, we prayed about this race. My wife and I prayed about this race and ultimately made the decision that for our children, we want to see a colorblind society, a society that is based on merit and opportunity as opposed to the weaponization that we've seen of terms like diversity, equity, inclusion. I believe wholeheartedly that we need a country that adopts the viewpoint that we need to promote MEI, merit, excellence, intelligence, and integrity.
Do you believe that because we have gotten to that point, or do you think that DEI never had a place in this country?
Well, I think, you know, we've seen in particular over the last several years, and some of this is being rolled back, but we've seen a weaponization of those terms in a way that is seen as divisive to most Kentuckians and most Americans. Folks don't care about your skin color. I think, you know, in all the races that I've, you know, talked about this issue, I've said, you know, people care about your values. Same context in the public sector or in private business. Folks want to see somebody that is excelling based on merit and opportunity, and we should be an opportunity society, and part of running for the United States Senate is to help promote that from that perch and help make sure we're supporting President Trump's agenda here in Kentucky.
You once worked for Senator McConnell, but you seem to have distanced yourself from the state senior senator during this campaign, at least early on. Do you seek the support of his supporters?
Well, look, I've always said I am my own man, and I sort of chuckle at the idea that, you know, I am anybody or tied to anybody specifically. I am tied to my conviction as a conservative. I'm tied to my wife and children, and I'm tied to my relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are the things that guide me. You know, my parents often asked, you know, when did I become a conservative? I was born into it. My mom will often tell the story that the last Democrat she voted for was Jimmy Carter in 1976 and has been voting Republican ever since. That is my story. It's a story of having core convictions, having grown up in Elizabethtown, E-Town, having grown up in Hardin County, where my parents owned a small business and saw a cross-section of the community come into that business. And again, folks at home that are watching this program, what they care about is someone from Kentucky, a senator that's going to stand up for our values. And I'm hopeful that if people have seen that I've got a good track record of that over my time serving as Attorney General. And again, I look to fight for our values in the Senate and preserve our constitutional rights and look for ways to help secure our southern border because we know a porous southern border brings drugs and poison into our communities that hurts our people.
When you say you support President Trump's agenda, what 1, 2, 3, what are the most important elements that that make you make that statement?
Well, a president that wants to secure our southern border and get illegal aliens out of here that are committing crimes out of the country, again, to secure our streets and make them safe. A president that is steadfast in making sure that this is a country and an economy that works for the hardworking men and women of the Commonwealth and of the United States. And then ensuring that, particularly for the folks here at home, that we empower and we promote coal and natural gas in our fossil fuels industry. That's something that is really incredibly important to Kentuckians. It gives us our competitive advantage. And so I am, again, in full support of President Trump's agenda in fighting for that.
Is it reasonable to think the coal industry can come back?
Well, it certainly can be helped by an administration in Washington, D.C., in the Trump administration, that wants to promote that as an economic engine for us, and alongside that, ensure that we have energy independence. And what you saw in the Biden years and in the Obama years really devastated our coal industry. And then you look at the context of the private sector, particularly when it comes to asset managers that said that they want to destroy the fossil fuels industry by 2030 or 2050. That's complete nonsense, and it's detrimental to our way of life here in Kentucky and to our competitive advantage. And so the answer is yes, we can see a re-emergence, if you will, of our coal industry, and I'm hopeful to help lead on that.
Do federal budget cuts concern you when it comes to Kentucky, when so many in this state rely so heavily on public assistance or public health care?
Well, I appreciate what President Trump is doing and his team to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, we've talked for decades about getting our fiscal house in order, and here is a president and an administration that is trying to do that. And the majority of Kentuckians and the majority of people across this country voted for leadership that's going to make the hard decisions. And I'm grateful to President Trump and his team for being willing to do that. Look at a president that is remaking our economy for the men and women that are working every day. I mean, there's no better example of a president that's working for us, that he signed a historic trade deal with United Kingdom, again, to help shift the trade imbalance that we had seen with United Kingdom. Now that is gone because this president was willing to stand on value and willing to do what was right by the men, the working men and women of this country.
The cuts in Kentucky, though, how do you suggest the legislature then handle that, by allocating more state funds in that way? We do collect more than we spend in Kentucky at this point.
Well, look, I think what is important here is that this president, this White House, our Congress are looking for ways to get our fiscal house in order. It's the responsible thing to do. When it comes to Kentucky specifically, we've got to make sure we take care of our people. This is one of the reasons that I think that rather than send money, over to continue to have a blank check in which we're sending money overseas, we've got to take care of the folks here. I mean, to your point, when FEMA is giving pennies on the dollar to folks over in eastern Kentucky during the flooding or in West Kentucky during the tornadoes, there's something wrong with that when we can send a blank check to folks overseas. And so we've got to reorient, we've got to shift our priorities to focusing on the people at home.
You noted that President Trump endorsed you in 2023 in your race, and prior to that, and you endorsed him early when he was running as well. Do you believe he will endorse you in this race?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, obviously the polling that's come out here recently has been very good for me. I'm at 44% right now, and other candidates are much lower than that. I think the closest person to me is at 17%. So I'm hopeful that President Trump, seeing the polling, seeing that I've been a huge supporter of his efforts to, again, make life better for the working men and women of this Commonwealth and this country, and my willingness to go out early. In 2023, I was the only statewide office holder that endorsed President Trump publicly and never backed away from that. And I'm grateful for his support, and he knows that if I'm in the Senate, he'll have somebody that's supporting his agenda because it is consistent with the values of Kentuckians.
Congressman Andy Barr argues that he has relevant Washington experience and could hit the ground running as a U.S. Senator. How do you counter what he brings to the table?
Well, if relevant experiences meant being in Washington for a long time, he can make that argument. Look, I think people want fresh blood, and I think they want youth and someone with a young family, someone that understands the plights and concerns of Kentuckians, and someone who has fought for Kentuckians and our constitutional rights. And know as a core conviction, I'm going to stand on conservative values and principles. And that's what I bring to the table. Look, I'm not going to disparage anybody that's in this race. This will be a question of who has the track record and who has demonstrated over the course of their time in public service that they will stand for the values of the men, women, and children of our 120 counties.
You think this race will get down in the gutter before it's over, before the primary?
Bill, I think a lot of people are going to attack me because it's no secret where I stand in the polls, and my wife and I think have built a good relationship with folks all across Kentucky. They've gotten to know our family. I talk about how important just how important it is for my wife to be a part of this process, and we're doing this for our boys. And so I think people generally, by and large, want to know your family, and I'm going to continue to talk about those things that are important at the dinner table.
It's getting closer all the time, but Kentucky's Republican registration has a plurality but not a majority, so you have to have some votes from the other side. We know that Democratic Governor Andy Beshear's approval is pegged around 68%, so doesn't a Republican nominee for the Senate have to work hard to win the votes of some Democrats as well?
Well, you got to work hard to earn every vote, and I certainly am going to do that. There's no question that at the end of the day, when it comes to what people care about, they care about low taxes, they care about safe streets, they care about, here in Kentucky again, our coal and natural gas industry. They care about leadership that's going to reflect their values in Washington, D.C. And again, I believe I've demonstrated that, and I'm going to continue to work hard to earn the support of every single Kentuckian. This race is too important. It's too important to have leadership that doesn't reflect those values. It's too important to not have leadership that is going to stand with President Trump. So I am hopeful, again, as I get around the state and have conversations with people, they'll see, not only as I talk about the issues, but they'll see my heart as well and know that I'm wanting to do right by our folks.
As we mentioned, it's a long campaign, and you're working to get your message out now. Do you say the more the merrier who get in this race, or would you like to see this continue to be basically a one-on-one with Congressman Barr?
Oh, it doesn't matter to me. People are going to make a judgment and a decision about whether they want to jump into it, and they have to make that assessment on their own. I know for us, again, I talked about it earlier, it was prayer, it was a lot of seeking wise counsel. So other folks will have to make that judgment about jumping into the race. Again, I think the polling is pretty definitive at this point in terms of where I stand with the electorate here in Kentucky, and I'm hopeful to continue to bring people into our camp because you want more people. And again, as you mentioned earlier, you got to have folks from across the aisle that ultimately want to join, and I think there are commonalities regardless of political identification that bind us here in Kentucky.
Appreciate you coming by early in the campaign.
Of course.
And I hope you'll do it again.
Oh, I will.
Keep us up to date.
Yes, sir.
Daniel Cameron running for the U.S. Senate on the Republican side. We're back in just a moment. Ashli Watts from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce joins us. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce is the state's largest business organization, and it is also very influential. The Chamber recently released a report on child care issues in the state. The challenges are real. Kentuckians in both parties know that. The Chamber also monitored the legislative session closely to protect its members. Ashli Watts is president and CEO of the Chamber, and she will take on another role later in the summer. She will be the MC of the political speakings at Fancy Farm. So the first woman to lead the Kentucky Chamber will be the first woman to try to keep order at Fancy Farm. So let's start there. Ashli, it's always good to see you. Welcome. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, the organizers call you the perfect choice. How do you feel about emceeing the historic picnic at Fancy Farm?
I would say when they called me a couple weeks ago, I was nervous but excited, which is probably what I should be. As someone who is a lifelong Kentuckian and have followed and now worked in politics for many years, Fancy Farm, as we know, is kind of the Super Bowl of politics, so it's really an honor to be able to be asked to be emceed. So I've gotten a lot of opinions from people, I've gotten a lot of suggestions, I've also gotten a lot of jokes from people, so we will see how it goes, but I am really excited and I hope to bring a good, fun tenor to Fancy Farm this year.
It may need that. Do you think you're ready for the rough and tumble of what may happen on stage?
I hope so. I have a couple months to prepare, so we will see what happens, but I joke from the Kentucky Chamber perspective, I still need a job that Monday following Fancy Farm, and so I'm going to make sure that we have fun, that we stay light, and kind of keep the show moving. That's my utmost job for that day.
Well, it is an honor to be asked to do it, right? The Chamber recently released a report on child care. In it, you had a survey that indicated people in both parties, by wide majorities, realize that this is an issue that they want lawmakers to focus on.
You know, child care is an issue that probably 5-10 years ago, Bill, if you were interviewing me, the Chamber was really not talking about. We now know that child care is a major workforce issue. I think a lot of that really came to light during COVID, but it really had been building for many years. And the system right now just does not work. And the thing that we have figured out is that when you're talking about other policy issues, sometimes you can look at other states to see what works, what doesn't work, and kind of get a game plan from there. With child care, every state is kind of in the same bucket that we are right now, where we're all trying to figure it out. So from a Kentucky Chamber perspective, we know that this is a workforce issue. We know that there are tens of thousands of Kentuckians that could be in the workforce if they had access to quality, affordable child care. And right now they just don't. There are pockets of the state that we call child care deserts that just don't have enough child care for the demand in that area. So I always say if the Kentucky Chamber had one superpower, it's the ability to convene. We can convene various groups and different policymakers and different ways of thinking kind of around a table to try to figure out common sense solutions.
What were some of the discussions, some of the topics that came up in those months that group was looking at the issue?
So we've been meeting for about 9 months with stakeholders from every kind of walk of life and every kind of side of this issue, as well as policymakers being pulled in as well. And so we really met for 9 months and worked through some of the tough issues and some of the recommendations that you will see the Kentucky Chamber pushing during the 2026 legislative session is making sure that we're fully funding the Employee Child Care Assistance Program, which is a bill that we helped push through a couple years ago through the General Assembly, where employers can help pay for child care for their employees. We also want to make sure that we are helping businesses, if they want to create child care centers, kind of do some deregulation, cutting some of that red tape, making that it's a little easier for employers to actually set up child care centers at their facility or somewhere near.
Do you think that on-site daycare is a likely part of the future?
We think that it is, and we think that it really is all hands on deck. It's not only the parents and the child, it's the employer, it's the community. Everyone has a vested interest in this. And so there are some great examples here in Kentucky of that. Toyota in Georgetown has a great child care facility. There's a hospital down in Rockcastle County that has a great facility. And so I think employers are really looking to maintain that strong workforce. And this is really a retention tool that they can use to make sure they can help working families. So we'll be coming out, I think, with a larger package later on in the year to really push next legislative session.
When you say workforce issues, I mean, some parents have to absolutely make the choice whether they work or if they don't have child care, right? But in other cases it is so expensive that it is really a close call on whether it is worth it.
You have to make the decision, I think, as a working parent to say, is it worth going to work when child care costs this much? And so that's something that working families have to decide every single day. I have 2 children of my own, and those were discussions that we had in our house with the cost of child care and where do we send them. We're lucky lucky that we had a strong support system around my children, but every family is different. And so this really is a workforce issue here in Kentucky, and we want to be able to support working families.
It's holding back the economy, you think?
We think that it is. Workforce is really the top priority of the Kentucky Chamber. Almost everything that we do ties back to improving our workforce. And so childcare is definitely one of those areas that we think that there is strong support to really make improvements to get our workforce back to where it needs to be.
You said other states are wrestling with this as well. And when you bring people into a room, there are just all kinds of ideas and all kinds of issues. How difficult is it to come to some consensus of how to move ahead?
It's difficult sometimes when you have people on various sides of the issue with very strong rooted opinions. We also had people that have been working in childcare for many years. And so bringing all those voices to the table, I think, was really critical. And so we actually worked with a group out of DC called Convergence to kind of be that third party moderator and facilitator to really work through this complicated issue so that it became a group project, kind of a work product, not just the Kentucky Chamber's, analysis of it and our recommendations, but this is really a group effort. And these are the package that we'll be pushing this next legislative session, hopefully with many other advocates.
One of the areas it comes down to, should child care assistance take the form of direct payments to parents, or should there be some sort of tax incentives? I'm sure that is an area where there's some divide.
There is. There's a lot of talk about just the cost of child care, how much child care workers make. All of that, I think, will be factored into the discussion. 2026 is a budget year in the General Assembly, so all of that, I think, will be taken through that process.
It can be a heavy lift. As you know, Senator Danny Carroll had a Horizons bill that he had put forward. It was like $300 million over the 2 years of the budget. So it is a lot of money, and some say that is not enough for what he proposed.
There are lots of opinions on this and a lot of people that have kind of their way to fix this issue. Our recommendations would not have that kind of price tag. It would have a much less price tag, but we think really improve the system. And so we're really just looking to do what we can do in this next legislative session and keep making steps forward.
We know your members have talked to you about tariffs and that ongoing issue. Is there some encouragement now that it looks like some trade deals may be worked out, but there also are a lot of Kentucky products that are impacted by these tariffs?
May is Small Business Month, and I think there's no better time to talk about the impact of tariffs to Kentucky than Small Business Month. There was recently an article that looked at the analysis of all the states that would be impacted by tariffs, and Kentucky was the state that would be hit hardest. We know that we are home to manufacturing and bourbon and agriculture, and all of those industries are going to be negatively affected by these tariffs. I think when we talk to businesses, there's just so much uncertainty right now. I actually was in D.C. yesterday meeting with our congressional delegation and told them that I feel like there's a sense of paralysis amongst business leaders and businesses here in Kentucky of really holding off on expansion, holding off on hiring, just waiting to see what happens with tariffs and with the market. Every day when you go and check your portfolio or you look at your news, the market goes up and down. We are optimistic that there have been some trade deals negotiated. We do believe in fair trade. We absolutely do not want the United States to be taken advantage of. But throughout history, we know that tariffs really do not work for economic prosperity, and they do not work for Kentuckians here as home of manufacturing, agriculture, and bourbon. And so what we're trying to do as the chamber is really tell our elected officials, especially in Washington, D.C., that these big national policies that we hear about really do have local impacts, and especially local impacts on our small businesses here who rely on an international economy and on global trade for their supply chain. And so that's what we're trying to do as an advocacy organization here in Kentucky, is really tell the story of what this is impacting Kentuckians. We know that it's going to cost Kentucky families about $3,000 this year if these trade deals are not negotiated and worked through. And so however we can amplify the voice of small businesses and businesses here in Kentucky, that's what we're trying to do.
Do you feel the congressional delegation listened to your concerns?
So we're really optimistic, and we're really fortunate here in Kentucky that we have Senator McConnell, Senator Paul, Governor Beshear, and others that are all on the same page saying that tariffs really do not work for Kentucky and explaining the issues around that, and especially for Kentucky small businesses. And so we've been really proud of the support that we've gotten in the chamber from our federal delegation. We know that they're talking to the White House as well, and so hopefully that message will get through.
We know you watch the state legislative session very closely, and in fact, your organization spent money to try to influence lawmakers, but Kentucky lowered its state income tax another 0.5%, so it'll be 3.5% starting next year. Do you think the Chamber will continue to push for reductions until the state income tax is eliminated.
We will, and it's actually the top strategic priority of the Kentucky Chamber. So when we get together with our board of directors and we say, you know, what do you want us to work on over the next couple of years? Several years back, they said lower the income tax. That was kind of their message to us at the Chamber, was that was going to be our top issue in terms of advocacy. And so over the last couple of years, with the work of the General Assembly, we've been able to help lower the income tax from 6% to now it's going to be 3.5%. We also haven't had to raise that sales tax. And so we're getting ready to really be a very strong competitive tax system here in Kentucky. So House Bill 1 that lowered that income tax from 4% to 3.5% was passed on bipartisan measure through the General Assembly, was signed into law by Governor Beshear, was our top priority. So we're really happy to see that happen. I think moving forward, the General Assembly passed a measure late in session to kind of adjust how you can lower that income tax. As of House Bill 8 from a couple years ago, the General Assembly could only lower that income tax 0.5% if certain triggers were met. We had enough in the rainy day fund. We wanted to make sure that, you know, we weren't going to overhaul the state budget by lowering that income tax. But we've met those triggers and now it's 3.5%. Going forward, the state legislature will now be able to lower that income tax 0.1%, 0.25%. It doesn't have to be 0.5%. And so I do think that every session, hopefully, we will continue to notch down that income tax because most other states are. And what we know is that the states that are growing in terms of population and job growth are the states that have a more competitive tax system and a lower income rate than we do.
A few seconds left. You're seeking nominations for Young Professional Awards coming up, right?
We do. We have our second annual Young Professional Summit in Louisville in July. And so if any businesses have a young professional they would like to nominate for our Young Professional of the Year, we would love to look through their applications.
Ashli, always good to see you and good luck at Fancy Farm.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
We'll see you before that, though.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody stay with us. We'll wrap up WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers in a moment. And we do want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. We certainly hope you stay with WKYT News for the latest, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.